Ladies, gentlemen, and friends beyond the binary, welcome to Step Back Tonight for today, June 15th, 2021. I'm your host, Tristan. We got anybody out in the chat tonight? We got a couple people. Nice. My name is Tristan. I am the host of YouTube channel Step Back History, and I stream 2 days a week on Mondays and Tuesdays. On Mondays from 12 till 2 Eastern, and on Tuesdays from 7 till 9 Eastern, which is what you're watching right now. I go by he, him pronouns, and you can find my work at stepbackhistory.com. I guess I also host Tristan Won't Shut Up, and I have videos at tristanwon'tshutup.com, but I haven't made a video on that channel in a long time. Mostly because I'm very busy with Step Back. Step Back basically dominates almost all of my time these days, so that's where I'm at. But if you want, there is a stream clip channel that I have started where I'm trying to post content from these streams. I'm a bit behind, but hey, if you want to see some stuff, there's a link. Also, if you want to support my work, you can go to patreon.com/stepbackhistory and support the channel for as little as 84 cents a month with a yearly subscription. You get videos early with no ads and no sponsorships. So if you want that, I try to make it as valuable as possible for people giving $1. So I hope that's quite enough. If you have Amazon Prime, you can support by giving a Twitch Prime subscription, which it's no extra cost to you. It's baked into your Amazon Prime subscription. So if you ever have that, please use it to help an independent Twitch creator, no matter who they are, because even if it's not me, it helps us out and it's no extra cost to you. But if you choose me, I'll be very grateful, obviously. And yeah, my latest video, the one that just came out, is on prepping. People seem to be liking it quite a bit. My next video is on Waco and Ruby Ridge. I just finished the outline for the script today, so hopefully I will be writing the script tomorrow. This will be quite a fun day. So if you continuing the White Power series, we're going to talk about how the White Power movement became the militia movement, and then Ruby Ridge and Waco sort of fueling this apocalyptic idea of the future. How the Zionist occupational government, as the white supremacists called it in the 1970s and 80s, then they changed the name to the New World Order in the 1990s. So all this stuff laid on top of each other going on in the 90s, leading up to its high water mark, but that won't be the next video. That'll be the video after. So that's what I'm working on now. If you have a question for one of my streams, for future streams, I'm going to put a link in the chat. This is a link that you can go to see future, or to submit questions for future streams. I hang on to them for a month before they expire, so if you hang around, you'll eventually probably hear your question answered. Unless you ask a whole ton of questions. The whole system is optimized so that, everybody will get some of their questions answered, but if you spam, your chances of having your questions read go down dramatically. Not that you won't get any, but your first question, very likely to be answered. Your 40th question, less likely so. And if there's any new people in the chat, please make yourself known. I see there's talks about not wearing pants in the YouTube chat. That's fun. So if this is your first time here, please make yourself known. We have a very active and fun chat community. So please feel welcome to say hello, because we're a whole gang. I'm trying to think about Winter Free Us. Welcome. But I think that's everything. What's going on, friends? What's the world going? What's the world up to these days? I've been very myself. I've been very busy with personal stuff and waiting to get that second vaccine. So that's all fun. My wife got me a wonderful new thing that I've kind of spent a bit too much money to turn into a hobby. So I've gotten into miniature painting. So I have this now, which is, I think, a thing that's designed for soldering irons, but I decided to make it because I'm printing a miniature. I don't think that's going to get focused on, is it? Not really. Oh. So I primed this mini last night. I'm probably going to print it sometime in the next day or so, or next couple days. I don't know. It's sitting on my desk and I'm looking at it, so at some point I got to put colors on it. And so, yeah, fun times. Fun times ahead. What else is going on with me? Gosh, I don't know. What are my thoughts on beef jerky? It's not my favorite thing in the world, but I do like it. Beef jerky to me always feels like something you get when you're on a road trip, you know? At least that's my take. I always feel like that's like the time that I think it's best. Because it's like, you know, doesn't get your fingers dirty, and you know you're on the road, and I don't know. Remember road trips? Remember going out? Oh, that is one thing I've been able to do in the last week. Last Friday, I went out for the first time because Ontario finally legalized going to legalized patio dining for up to 4 people. So Kelly and I went out and got ourselves a nice evening out on the town. That was good. You know how Russia has all the trappings of liberal democracy, but all the elections are rigged so Putin never loses? Is something like that more plausible in the U.S. than the open German Gilead-style dictatorship? Oh yeah, for sure. I would argue that that's almost the case right now. You know? Like, if you think about it, in America, when it comes to most of its most significant political positions, there's virtually no difference between the different political parties. Like, in America, there's functionally no way to vote against imperialism. There's no way to vote against right-wing neoliberal politics. So you have choice of 2 right-wing governments, essentially. The choice between Democrats and Republicans is so small on substantive things that that it's effectively a one-party state. And if America, or if the Republicans get their way with all these laws they want to do, I think their next big goal is just to have it so that the Republicans are always president. They're always in government, and the Democrats always raise money always make big bucks raising money as the resistance against that. That's like how I seem to see it. Like, the Democrats like being in opposition because they make big money when they're not in charge, and they're not beholden to anybody, because the thing is, they are meant to absorb the energy of the activist left. The activist left tends to want policy deliveries, but they can't do that because their owners are market overlords or whatever. So the Democrats are always in their best position when they are the opposition against the Republicans. They raise good money. They get their critical alliances from the left, and they just keep rolling along. Ooh, that's a good quote. The United States is also a one-party state, but with typical American extravagance, they have 2 of them. It's pretty good. Who said that? Who's that quote attributed to? Just what I need. Thanks for streaming. Aw, well, nice to see you, Ron. Sorry, I gotta stop playing with this. My helping hands. Isn't this cool? Like, I love the fact that there's things like this that exist. I don't know if you guys can really take in what this is, but it's a thing that's designed for soldering, and you use it to Like there's two alligator clips that you use to hold things in place while you have a magnifying glass to get really in depth on stuff. And I'm going to use it for my mini painting, and so I'm quite fascinated by it. And it's got a lot of articulation that just cries fidget toy. You know, I really should, while I'm like, you know, neurodivergent and such, I should probably find, I had an old fidget cube around here somewhere. I should probably, like, you know, find it again so that I can, well, you're not a, well, you're not a cube, but I'll take you. Because this will help me stay focused on the stream. There we go. You had one of those for soldering. Very good stuff. Yeah. I got myself a nice payout from some royalties for some old videos being used in textbooks. That I used to, cause like, you know, my wife told me that I never buy anything nice for myself. So I bought the stuff to get started with mini painting and with 3D printing. So I spent some money that I'd saved up to get myself started on those things, and I'm very excited to get the ball rolling. Drew Jones, you're using that for soldering, I assume. Oh, opting out. I know you. You're my newest patron. Hello. Nice to see you in the chat. Doesn't sound like frivolous spending. It sounds like an investment. You need to spend like that more often. Don't discount yourself. That's good. I needed a new hobby. I struggle. See, here's the thing. In my life, I struggle to figure out what it is to do when I don't have work to do. Because I get bored very easily. And I have a lot of issues trying to keep myself, especially keeping my hands busy, hence the fidget spinner right now. But like, I have a lot of issues with like keeping my attention span up, especially when like the thing that I want to do is like watch TV or watch a movie or listen to podcasts or whatever. I need something else keeping my hands busy, or else I'm just not able to pay attention. And it used to be like, you know, video games, some video games would do it for me, but video games haven't really been giving me that dopamine that I need to pay attention to podcasts lately, so I've moved. I thought I would maybe someday pick up an interest in painting miniatures for Dungeons & Dragons, because that's like a thing that I'm really into, hence all the books right here. And Kelly got me for our anniversary, which was about 11 days ago, the beginnings of miniature painting, and so... and I got my like kind of royalty check around the same time. So my brain went, hey, I should probably go and buy all the things you need to do miniature painting. And I also was thinking of getting a 3D printer because I saw one on a really, really good sale. So I bought that too. And then I was like, I got to get all the things for that, because you can't just buy a 3D printer. You got to get the goop for it. You got to get a mask. You got to get gloves. You got to get like, I had to get a big thing of alcohol. So I decided, I was like, this is all to get set up, and then hopefully it'll all be much easier to kind of maintain going forward. So hopefully that'll work out well. There's an episode of Star Trek where Data gets stranded on a primitive planet. At one point, he has to make a microscope with like medieval technology. What he comes up with kind of reminds me of that thing. Oh yeah, that's the episode where he like he loses his memories, and he has like a briefcase full of like something that's like really radioactive, and at some like it gets dragged into town, and then people started getting sick from the radiation sickness, and he has to like figure out what's causing the radiation, and so like pre-scientific people are trying to figure out how to conceive of radiation. Kind of interesting. You don't have to get a big thing of alcohol. That just makes it more interesting. No, you do have to get a big thing of alcohol because you have to wash it. You have to wash it in alcohol, and then you have to put it under a UV lamp for an hour so that it hardens. It's the alcohol. It's isopropyl alcohol. It's the alcohol that'll kill you if you try to drink it. He had some mead for the first time last night. That is some good shit. I am jealous for you to have mead for the first time. Delicious, delicious bee wine. What kind of paint is alcohol based? No, this is for the 3D printer. I got stuff for mini painting, and I got stuff for 3D printing. So I could 3D print the things that I can then paint. That's the whole idea. Because I wanted to be able to print like custom stuff for Dungeons and Dragons games that I'm running. So I wanted to go print the monsters and then paint the things that I print. So I have like a whole process. And I'm also, because I get a free subscription to Skillshare. I have a free subscription to Skillshare, so I get to I'm taking classes on Blender to learn how to make like digital sculpting and stuff. I know you said before that you've resisted streaming Dungeons & Dragons. Could you elaborate on that? Sure. Yeah, I got into Dungeons & Dragons in 2017. I had a lot of fun with it. I played it for a while, but very soon I got into running Dungeons & Dragons. And I streamed it briefly for a little while before I got my job at CCLA. And it was, like, fine. It's just that very quickly, like, when you're a, creator, when you're an internet creator, and I think this is, like, true of, like, people who are not creators, too. There's, like, this urge to, like, monetize your hobbies. And I eventually did the ultimate monetizing my hobby. I became a YouTuber. So, I guess, like, there was just this pressure, like, if you've noticed that everybody who's been getting into Dungeons & Dragons, who has already got, like, an audience through some sort of media that they're creating, have started these actual play podcasts. And so there's this pressure to do it because it's like, it's a thing that you could do, but I made the intentional decision about a year or two ago that Dungeons and Dragons wasn't really a thing I wanted to do on the internet. Like, it's fun, but it's an oversaturated market. But most of all, I wanted to have some sort of hobby that I wasn't thinking about in terms of how do I monetize it, how do I get popular with it, and just something that I do as a creative outlet that is strictly for fun. Like, I don't really want to run a D&D show where I have to prepare for, like, what would an audience like. I want to run a D&D game where I put my creative energy into figuring out what's going to make the same four, crazy people entertained week after week. And I love doing that. I love D&D being this thing that I do with my friends, and I don't really every time I think that I want to do something that's public facing with a stream or something like that, I always try to resist it. I've only written in that I have that my only strong the only time that I would do some sort of streamed YouTube thing is if I was doing it for charity, and it wouldn't be like a show, it would be like a one-time thing. The YouTube algorithm doesn't like content variety. This is true, but also, like if I were to do anything like this, I probably wouldn't do it on Step Back. I don't see how I would do it on Step Back. I probably would. It'd be on Twitch, or it'd be on a podcast, or be on some other channel or something like that. All right, let's see. Israeli politics is unlikely to change. Do you think Netanyahu might face some legal consequences for corruption now that he's out of office? I hope so. I don't have much to say on that, but I hope that it does. All right. Last week you said the U.S. was too big to maintain a military dictatorship over the whole country. What about Russia and China? Both those countries have their populations extremely concentrated in one part of the country. Russia is humongous, but like there are parts of Russia where they don't even know that the Soviet Union has collapsed because they're just so far remote. China, similarly, China has like an urban core that that is very easy for them to maintain control over. America is a lot more spread out. It does have major metropolitan areas, but America in general has a lot. Doesn't have like a concentrated geopolitical area that that the federal government can exercise a lot of force over in order to control things. While they are very big countries, they just have big areas that are very empty. America has big areas that are very empty too, but just they've got more cities and more, or they've got more like cities spread out in a bigger area, I guess I should say. Very much found you through Thoughts Time. Awesome. Thank you, Crudman123. How about a stream about D&D, like maybe a history of the different versions or lore? Maybe. I did a channel like that for a little bit. It didn't really go very far. But even so, like at the moment, I'm trying to make sure that nothing that I do in my personal time, like I need to resist the urge to turn it into work. And at the moment, Step Back is my job. Step Back is the thing that I put my, I get up at 9 a.m., or I don't get up at 9 a.m., I get up at 7 a.m. But, you get up, you start work at 9 a.m., you put in the hours, and for me, when I'm doing that, it's for Step Back content. Everything, well, and one other thing that will be announced at some point in the near future. But other than that, I try to keep my creative projects, side projects, like things that I'm making sure that I'm doing just for fun, because I don't want to turn another thing into work, if that makes sense. Dedicated channel for Romeo and Phoebe, a cat channel with whimsical license for music. Yeah, if I ever make an Instagram, it'll just be a Phoebe Instagram. Would you still be doing the prepping thing and worrying about the class society if Bernie was president? Yeah. Yeah, the reason why I'm into prepping has to do with, like, climate change and, like, the refugee crisis of the what's it called? Of the later century. So jealous of my fan right now. Really? Like this thing? Why? Because it's ruffling my shirt? Oh boy. What have we got for questions? Do you think that the UFO is just CGI to distract us from Israeli ethnic cleansing? I don't know if it's for the Israel thing, because the UFO stuff started in, like, got going like way before the sort of recent stuff's been going on in Gaza, like just in the last like month or two. But I do think that, but I do wonder if it's a distraction to try and increase the amount of money that is given to the Pentagon in a way that gets bipartisan support. Because maybe they think that support for imperialist wars abroad is going to start to go down. So maybe, defending America from alien invaders is like the thing that they can get on board with. I have no fan or air conditioning. Oh, I am so sorry. What do I think about recent events in Peru? Peru is, I'm trying to remember. The situation with Peru is that Peru has they have a contested election going on right now, where essentially the daughter of a former dictator has basically declared herself president, despite the fact that it seems like it was probably that she probably fucked with election results, and that it's more likely this leftist candidate who won. And like, don't get me surprised. If that's the case, like that's all I really know. I'm not like super in depth. I would not be surprised if America was propping that up. Just like how it just came out recently that America was, at least in some part, involved with the whole thing with Evo Morales. So. Fujimori is claiming fraud. Fujimori is the right-wing candidate, right? And Castillo is the left-wing candidate, if I remember correctly. It's been a bit. All I really know about it is what I've picked up by some reports on Democracy Now! And stuff. I watched a video that argued that the pilots in the radar text could have just misjudged the distance and speed. Do you buy that? I mean, it could be. It's a much more logical explanation than, life forms traveled literal impossible amounts of distance to show up in 2004 and then just disappear. So that seems like a much less likely option, to the point where even ridiculous answers are more likely. Doesn't seem like Fujimori is going to get through with her bullshit campaign, though. Who knows? What happens when your U.S.-backed right-wing dictatorship doesn't win the election, usually, is they find some way to undermine the authority of the president and then have them just assume power, like what happened in Bolivia. Or they just assassinate the leader and install a right-wing patsy, like what happened in Chile. So, we'll see. I imagine that the CIA is still working on what their next steps are. So, yeah. Okay, next is, I want to get into Star Trek, but I know nothing about it. Where should I start? Good question. I actually answered this in one of my videos. If you want to get into Star Trek, Jiffy Chips, but you don't know where to start, this is the thing. So there's only really one Star Trek show. There's only one Star Trek show that is that I think requires you watch anything else in order to get started. Most Star Trek shows were written with the idea of syndication, so they're designed so that you do not have to have a ton of prior knowledge in order to get started. So really, whatever show appeals to you the most is good to start with. The only show I wouldn't do that with is Picard, the show that aired last year, because Picard is almost entirely a nostalgia trip for fans of like multiple different parts of the sort of 90s era of Star Trek. So really, if you want to get started with Star Trek, you should probably try one of the better rated shows. The two that are probably recommended are The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. And there is a website that I used to go to. Let me find it. It was really useful. Let's see. Let me see if we can find this. Yeah, there was a website called Let'sWatchStarTrek.com, which goes through the different series. And so, like, if you choose The Next Generation or Deep Space Nine, you can go through the list and find out what episodes are skippable. With TNG, you definitely should do that. Basically, it rates all the episodes from 1 to 5. 5 being a classic episode, 4 being a good episode, 3 being a alright episode, and then 2 being skippable, but, you know, still watchable if you want to get completion, and 1 just like a bad episode you shouldn't watch. And it does make sure that if there is an episode that's important for continuity, that it'll tell you the rating, and it'll say watch this for continuity if that's important to you. So that's a good place to get started. We watched TNG through doing that, watching only episodes that were 3 or higher, and that worked out really well. Yeah, Kelly and I kind of went through a whole process where we watched all of Star Trek in the last year, and we had a pretty good time using that to sort of skip through the really bad episodes. And when we watched the original series, we only watched episodes that were 4 or higher because, yeah, the original series is a TV show from the 1960s, and it very much feels like it. So, also apparently discussing making NATO member. Oh boy, war with Russia, that should be fun. Yeah, Ukraine becoming a NATO member would be difficult in a lot of ways. Because, gosh, I mean, I understand why Ukraine would want to do it. Russia basically is chomping at the bit to reconquer them. And they've already carved off, like, chunks of, they carved off, like, entire chunks of, the country with, with the Crimean Peninsula, and now with the sort of, like, eastern, Ukrainian republics. But, yeah, so I can imagine why Ukraine wants to join NATO at this point, but who knows where that's going to go. Because it also means that the other NATO members have to pledge to basically get involved in nuclear war if Russia decides to, go all out. Did I watch Spock's Brain? Yes, when we watched through TOS, we watched Spock's Brain because that was an episode that on the website I'm talking about mentioned that it is a very bad episode, but also very good episode. Spock's Brain is probably the worst episode of Star Trek. Because the episode is awful. The premise of it is stupid, and yet it is also hilarious. And there's an homage to it in an episode of Deep Space Nine that is fucking amazing. So, yeah. Is taxation theft? I mean, to an extent, yeah. Especially because a lot of taxation is just taking working people's money and giving it to giant corporations. Using taxed resources to do stuff like, build the civil society that our society needs to function, that's not really a thing to complain about. But a lot of it is just to refinance the corporations that are not paying any taxes at all. Is the USA starting a Cold War with China? It definitely seems that way. What do you think of the AFL-CIO trying to expel the Vermont chapter? I did not know anything about that. There's a lot of popular LGBTQ positive cartoons right now. If the GOP established one-party rule, do you think they'd clamp down on those? Maybe. Really depends upon how, ironclad their rule is. Because also, resentment against those kinds of things is the kind of stuff that Republicans channel the anger of in order to get power. So if there's nothing making Republicans angry, the Republican Party loses a lot of its juice. So they need things to just get mad about randomly. What's your favorite TOS movie and why is it Wrath of Khan? Wrath of Khan's pretty good. Wrath of Khan is the... Actually, I will say this. Wrath of Khan's a good Star Trek movie. Is it the best TOS movie? I don't think so. I'm going to make some spicy takes here, but my favorite TOS movie... Like, my favorite TOS movie for just being a legit good movie is The Undiscovered Country. I really like The Undiscovered Country. I like that it bridges the gap between the TOS and TNG era in a really nice way. I like that it's about basically the end of the Cold War. It just had like a lot of fun stuff going on. It was a really great last hurrah for a lot of that cast when they were starting to get a bit old to be in those kinds of movies. So I found that and also it's a very solid mystery story. Like, I remember, even though, like, you know, mysteries kind of lose their impact after the first one, I think that it was like a pretty legit, fun mystery. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it immensely. The meme answer, of course, is The Voyage Home, because There Be Whales here is one of the best, like, the whole plot of The Undiscovered Country is ridiculous and great, and I'll take it. A video I'd love to see you make would be a history of Trotskyism / Socialist Workers' Party in the U.S. Yeah, I mentioned it briefly, or did I mention it? I had an aside about it in one of my videos not long ago, but I think I cut it. So maybe I should. Maybe I think that's what the case was. I'm trying to remember. You played. Have I played Skyrim? If so, Emperor Stormcloaks are both power structures. Yeah, I mean, nobody really cares about the Emperor or the Stormcloaks. Nobody who plays Skyrim gives any shits about the two main storylines, about them or the dragons. And they just like to do... Like, everyone just likes to fuck off and do a bunch of side quests. So, that's an objective fact. And, yeah. So, because Skyrim is just a fun game to fuck around in. In Voyage Home, you can hear them paging Dr. Ben Dover. Yeah, that's great. I think my favorite TOS movies are The Undiscovered Country and The Voyage Home. Both just solid, fun movies. So the Klingons put a load of neoliberal reforms that make things even worse after the moon blew up. I mean, that's, if you think about it, essentially that's what happened. Look after that they made peace with the Federation. They put fucking Chancellor Gowron in power, and Gowron is basically the Boris Yeltsin of the Klingon Empire, right? The little man with like the beady eyes, and although Gowron is much more based, but yeah, the Klingons definitely gonna cut back on being themselves in a lot of ways. Is he drunk all the time? I mean, all Klingons, I think, are drunk all the time is the thing, though. That's my secret, Captain. I'm always drunk. My fear is that Ukraine will find a way to portray Russia supporting secessionists as an attack to invoke Article 5. And that could easily be World War III. Yeah, I feel like a lot of the times what would happen, like the thing is, if Ukraine joined NATO, then they would probably, the U.S. would probably be called upon to get involved in what's happening in Donetsk and everything like that. And then it would put Russia kind of up against the wall about whether to, not so secretly send Russian soldiers into these regions to fight for them. And Putin might be forced to back off. Because I don't know if Ukraine is worth starting World War III over, but Wait, the Klingons blew up their moon? I'm on board. No, what happened is in Star Trek Six, The Undiscovered Country, the sort of inciting incident of it. So the Undiscovered Country is about the Klingons and the Federation basically making peace with each other, and it came out around the same time as the end of the Cold War. And so the whole idea of it is that it starts with their this moon that is like their big power plant called Praxis exploding, and everybody finding out about it. And it's supposed to be a direct historical allegory to Chernobyl. And that, so like that, there's that. So they, and then they try to make peace. And it's about like how these old generations of cold warriors are refusing to get with the times and move on with the next generation that wants to have peace and prosperity. And there's like, well, what's going to happen to Starfleet? Starfleet's going to have to move from being a military organization to a one of exploration, which is sort of like what it is by the time you get to TNG. So it's like this real bridge between the two. Watch the Men in Black anime. I will high five some drywall. What? Okay. What would it take for Russia to become less autocratic? Couldn't tell you. It has Russia's never been a democracy. Like, it's never really had democracy ever happen. So it would be kind of complicated, you know? Like, you have to like build like a whole democratic you have to build institutions that can stick, and like you would probably need a new constitution, and like I don't know. I feel like it'd be really difficult. There's a Voyager episode where Janeway says blonde wine is twice as strong as whiskey, which would make it 80% alcohol, and they drink that stuff by the pint glass. Damn right. Yeah. But, yeah, Star Trek The Undiscovered Country, solid film. Really love it. It's also I mean, this isn't like, you know, saying most, but it's like one of the better looking Star Trek movies. Like, they've got some really great stuff with the USS Excelsior, and I don't know. I feel like it's a solid movie overall. Am I going to just talk about Star Trek all night? I know that half my audience would be super pissed if I did that. We got for... What if the power in blood wine is from other substances than alcohol? Ooh. Blood wine gets you high? Will Biden be the last Democratic president then? I don't know at this point. Like, the next few years, a lot of things could happen. Because the thing is, here's the real big problem what's happening. The Republicans are dying. Literally. The Republican Party has a base that is actively based around... it's actively based around exclusion and hatred and serving a specific class of people. Specifically, old white dudes and people with money. The problem is that America is quickly becoming a more racially diverse country. There's that whole thing about how America will be a majority-minority country in like a few decades, which means that white people won't be like a hegemonic majority in and of themselves in the U.S., which the Republicans keep trying to strategically maneuver into new communities, but the problem is that their base is open white supremacists, so they just run into a wall. And so that always ends up being a problem. So they're now going into just trying to be more and more comfortable with minority rule and making it harder to vote so that white people are the only people who are allowed to vote. That's sort of what all these laws in like Florida and Texas and stuff are trying to do. If they're successful, they might be able to, gerrymander and suppress their way through a few elections. But in the end, unless they make some like major changes to the groups that they appeal to, the Republican Party has got limits on how long it can actually keep winning elections by just like maximizing the anti-democratic nature of of American society. Watch the Matrix anime or eat a grilled cheese to dead. I have. Are you talking about the Animatrix? I have seen that. Yeah, I have. I still have night. There's a visual from the Animatrix that still fucking gives me nightmares. So yeah, I have seen the Animatrix, and I have seen because I watched it when I was like, when it first came out. I think I was like a teenager, and yeah, there's this one shot that scared the ever living hell out of me. Didn't think it was scary at the time I saw it, but I just every once in a while have nightmares where I see it. So it's like, oh, okay. Feelings on Star Trek V? I mean, it's not good. It is a bad movie. It's Star Trek trying to do a Star Wars movie, and it's not good. Don't Klingons also have more redundant organ systems than humans? Yes, that is a thing. I think this was brought up in the old Reactor days, but did you ever watch the Star Trek parody show Orville? Yes. Yeah, I watched both my wife and I really liked it. I enjoy the Orville. It's a good show. If you're in the Matrix, would you want to get out or not? I think so. I'd like to get out. I feel like the unpleasant truth. I am a person who I would like to think would always prefer an unpleasant truth to a reassuring lie. Is the Orville dead? No, but it's being moved to a streaming platform, and it's moving to a streaming platform, and it's it took a year off, so it should be coming back. I thought it should be coming back this year, if not next year. What made me a leftist? What made me a leftist was the Iraq War. Or should I say, probably pretty soon after 9/11. Like, I think within like 6 months of 9/11, more people had died in Afghanistan than had died on 9/11. And in my mind, I thought that was just completely, there was no need for that whatsoever. And I kind of got involved with like anti-war groups, and those anti-war groups gave me books to read. I remember one of my teachers gave me a book called Rogue Nation, an introduction to the America the rest of the world knows, and that got me really like into like, because that was like a book that covered a lot of like things that are, it was pretty controversial for its time, but are kind of like, whatever today. Things like, did you know that, they didn't need to drop the Nagasaki and Hiroshima bombs? Did you know that, these kinds of things. So that sort of got me started. You want to eat snot in a cave. I would rather eat snot in a cave than, be like in a reassuring lie simulation that means that humanity is constantly being controlled by robots. Yes. What will it take for governments to take climate change seriously? I mean, some are. Most aren't. I have a feeling that because I feel like I don't know if there is a thing. I feel like if we are going to take climate change seriously, it's going to be in spite of governments, not because of governments. Um, yeah. So the war in Iraq happened in 2003. I was in the 10th grade at that point. I want to say. No, I was in the ninth grade, so I was a freshman in high school, and that had a pretty big impact on me. I know that how somehow somewhere between the somewhere between the invasion of Afghanistan and the invasion of Iraq, I somehow that's how I went from a time of being apolitical to being political and becoming a leftist. What exactly happened? Again, what exactly happened in that time period? I actually can't even remember anymore. But it had a lot to do with just like, I think that like I got into watching The Daily Show at some point, and I started getting into like anti-war groups and stuff like that. So. How do you argue against people who simp for monarchies? Asking for a friend. God, I don't know. I guess the big thing is just pointing out that they cost a lot of money and they don't bring any value. And that, why do you want some weird old lady being your boss? Define taking climate change seriously. I mean, in a sense, building domed cities for the super rich would be taking it seriously. Yeah, I mean, I guess like doing anything to address it. I don't know what government. I have a feeling that like the only way that governments are ever going to take climate change seriously is if they feel like it's politically safe to do so. And at this moment, we have a electoral. Electoral politics is such that people want both an environmentally conscious policy, but they also want a strong economy. And if you were to evaluate the relative importance of a strong economy versus environmentally forward-thinking policies, the voters in general will. The environmental policy, what's it called? The voters in general will choose economics like 9 times out of 10. And until that calculus changes somewhat, I don't know what will happen. And so in many ways, I think that a lot of like the ways to transition off of fossil fuels and stuff like that is to really get us to the point where it becomes cheaper to not use fossil fuels than to use them. And we're kind of getting there. We're getting there faster than we thought. The sort of there's been some encouraging reports coming out of especially people who work in like oil speculation markets that there's some like serious deep changes happening, and a lot of people who are very serious analyzers of oil markets and oil prices and like energy policy and stuff like that are seeing that the long-term investing in petroleum is no longer a thing that they are thinking about doing. And depending upon how right they are on that, the calculus might change in a way that'll change things. Whether or not that is soon enough to save the planet, that's a bigger question. Because, we needed to be moving off of this ages ago. And if we have to wait for technology and market forces to get us to the point where climate change or where we're not where we're carbon where we're no longer pumping unreasonable amounts of carbon into the atmosphere, it might be too late to stop like a serious feedback loop and stuff like that. Did you become a history nerd before you became a leftist or vice versa? I became a history nerd a little bit after I became a leftist, I think. Maybe before, or maybe around the same, very close in time. I became a history nerd because my parents took me on a lot of road trips when I was a kid. I spent a lot of my summers in, like, in my parents' car, driving around the United States and seeing, like, old battlefields or museums and historical sites and stuff like that. That's really like what got me into history in a big way. But that was like happening, through my whole childhood. But I started taking an active interest in history as a subject in high school when I had the choices to take more history classes. So I don't know. Again, it's so long ago that I can't really like tell you there's no like moment where I knew that like, oh, history is the thing I wanted. Well, there's no moment where I realized that I was a history nerd, but the only thing that really came to mind was when I was listening to Hardcore History, and around that time I was supposed to be choosing what my major was going to be in university. And it was because I was listening to Hardcore History at the time that I actually changed my plans, because I was going to go to university for sociology, but then I changed it to history, sort of like at the last second. Please respond to the goat and goblin totally owning you. Did they own me? I haven't seen that yet. I imagine it's in the stream archive somewhere. I definitely want to take a look. I'll bet it's funny. I don't know what they said, though. Do people still believe in infinite growth on a finite planet? I don't know. I don't think anybody like consciously believes it, but there are a lot of people who act as if that is the case. And this is the big issue with dealing with climate change, is that we have a lot of habits that we do that, like, consciously we believe that that climate change is real, and that we need to get our energy under control, and that we need to be doing serious things like in a very small amount of time to really handle stave off the worst of it. And at the same time, we still vote, and we still have lifestyles that are based on an idea that we can just keep growing infinitely forever, because our goals are so far outside of reality. Do you think Bernie would have failed to get the Green New Deal done? I think it would have been a big fight for sure. I can't tell you for sure, because it would be very based on if Bernie had won the primaries, what the congressional electoral math would have looked like. I have a suspicion that Bernie would have had a much more solid Democratic victory than Biden had. In which case, I do think that the bigger fight would be like fighting the Democratic Party trying to get things done. But I can't, at that point, like, you're speculating to variables that nobody knows, and I don't like speculating. It has, like, no value. Just heard about a native tribe that won a big real estate suit in Vancouver, like a grade A seaside land, planning to build low-income housing. Do I know anything about it? No, I don't. The LaRouche people believe that there are no limits to growth. That makes no sense. In Squamish? I've heard the word Squamish, but I don't exactly know what's going on. This is not a story that I know anything about. I've been spending too much time in the 1990s this week. Oh, man. Every time I talk about climate change in a stream, I get like a huge list of people who just want me to just absolutely go prone and bow in complete praise to the god of nuclear power. I don't hate nuclear power, but we're like, what's it called? I feel like nuclear power is becoming a bit of a... it's past its prime. It's very expensive. It requires a whole lot of engineering that a lot of other sources of energy don't. and we're getting way better at renewables than we are at building nuclear power plants that take like a decade to come online once they've been built, and they are horrendously expensive. So, while like I don't see any issues with nuclear power, I'm not like I'm not like a nerd about it. I just feel like its utility is precipitously going down compared to the rapid development of things like not only wind and solar power, but things like geothermal and stuff like that. That we're getting to a point where the places where nuclear power plants are going to make sense are getting less and less. Waffles or pancakes? I am most definitely a waffles person. Have you ever talked to somebody who you thought was on the verge of being a leftist but ended up being a huge reactionary? Nothing's coming to mind. They're building low-income housing for everyone with tons of green space. That sounds great. That's awesome. I'll have to Google it after the stream is over. All right. Multifaceted energy production sources will always outpace singular forms like nuclear. Nuclear industry has found this new strategy where they frame themselves as environmentally friendly and the victim of a conspiracy by the coal industry. I mean, like, nuclear power has its uses. Like, what's it called? If we build like a moon base, it's almost definitely going to be nuclear powered to get started. Nuclear or solar, I guess. But like, and there's probably going to be places where nuclear reactors will make sense because it's like a place where there's no sun, no wind, and no geothermal, and no like biomass or fucking wood chips or any other form of carbon neutral or renewable power makes sense. And then they'll put one there. But like, the only places where like it makes sense to me is like places where like uranium's really easy to get, which is not a lot of places. It's not a very common mineral. And there are just better options. Like, if you had asked me 10 years ago, I would be way more into nuclear. But like, you kind of have to be ignorant of not to say that like nuclear is our way forward now, when like the amount that solar panels have dropped in price in the last decade is astronomical. And we're like nowhere close to, like, we are so close to the point where not having solar panels is like actually like cost inefficient. Like, we're getting to the point now where energy companies and stuff like that not switching to renewables is ideological instead of economic. We're very close to that point, if not past that point in many places. But yeah, it's things have changed a hell of a lot in the last few years. I read that Schumer said he's committed to getting voter reform passed by August. I'm worried he can say, we gave it our best shot, but now it's time to move on. Well, yeah. That's what they got Manchin and Sinema, like, that's why they're there. That's their point. Like, the Democratic Party, like, you think the Democratic Party actually is mad at them? Like, that's their job. They are there to keep the Democrats from doing anything until the Republicans can take over and they can go back to being the opposition. Because the opposition's when they do all their fundraising, and that's what they're really about now. So, oh yeah. The other thing, too, when talking about nuclear is that we'll see where this goes, but fusion power is one of those technologies that's been 10 years away for 30 years, right? But there was a major breakthrough in China a few weeks ago that's been very interesting. They were able to maintain a fusion reaction for a lot longer than anybody had done before. And so I'm very curious if at some point fusion might be a useful source of energy. And if it is, then like, all bets are off. It's like you can get one fusion reactor working, you are literally like, it is like the most efficient, and it's basically the most efficient way to generate energy that isn't what's it called? That isn't like just somehow figuring out how to make power off of matter antimatter reactions, right? So fusion will be, if they can make fusion work, which like, who knows, right? That would be a big deal. Have you heard about India's potential of being a leading force in renewable energy? No, but it wouldn't surprise me. Like, India is such a huge country that if it decided to invest in anything, it would be one of the world leaders in X thing. Like, China is China is the most environmentally destructive country on Earth, and it is also the global leader in investment in green energy at the same time. If fusion reactors were to work, they would absolutely be the future. Yeah, I agree. What's my opinion on Narendra Modi? Well, I did my master's thesis on why Islamophobia being bad, so you can maybe hazard a guess that I'm not the biggest fan of Narendra Modi. I did a project recently, which you guys will probably hear about sometime this year, where I talk about Indian like right-wing Hindu nationalism and how it has a very ugly legacy, and it is, like putting Muslims in a very dangerous position right now in India. And Modi has just like, Modi is weaponizing, scapegoating Muslims in order to blame them for all of India's problems, and is using it to propel himself to more and more power. You think Biden wants voter reform, but he's unwilling to prioritize it? I don't know. I have a feeling that Biden, if he actually... Biden's the fucking president of the United States of America. I have a feeling that if he really wanted to, somehow he could get Sinema and Manchin in line. The fact that Manchin and Sinema get them to say that they're doing a progressive thing, but don't actually have to do any of them, and then they just have two people that they can blame... Like, that is their dream scenario. Do I think that the Democrats like sat in a smoke-filled room and were like, haha, we're going to put on a whole show, we're going to do nothing and use you two to block it? But no, that's not the case. But because they've got these two people who are being obstinate pricks in the Senate, I feel like they're just not going to push too hard to change that situation. Because if they had the Senate and they knew that they could push anything through the Senate, then they would have another situation like they had in 2008, where if they wanted to not do anything, which is usually what they want to do, they don't want to do anything. They don't want to pass major legislation because that would involve the Democratic Party's issue is that they're a right-wing party with a left-wing base. And so they, like, in order to appease the people who fund the party, they have to not pass legislation. But their voters want them to pass legislation to make people's lives better. And that runs into each other. Like their happy place is when they are wanting to do like progressive legislation, but they can't because of something. If they were really serious about making the changes that they wanted to make, and they actually cared about these issues, things like dealing with some fucking weird anime person from Arizona and like whatever the fuck the parliamentarian is, like, trust me, these would not be problems if they had any political will to actually overcome them. Speaking of Modi, do you think of this? What do you think of this? I don't. Oh, you're talking about demonetization. I don't know. I don't know how I felt. I don't know really what to think about demonetization. I have a new friend, which is fun because it's been a long time since we've had new friends. But I have a new friend who is actually from India, and she was talking a little bit about demonetization a couple weeks ago when we were hanging out. But I'll probably ask her a little bit more about it at some point because I don't really know that much about the real impacts of demonetization. Hey, Mark Radler, thank you so much. Thank you for saying thank you for your work. All right. Two major parties that make different mouth noises while working to push near identical agendas. As a Canadian, I have no idea what that's like. Hey, opting out. As a fellow Canadian, I also don't know what that's like. /sarcasm. Remember how the fact that we have Doug Ford as premier? Oh, but you're probably not from Ontario, or if you are, I don't know if you are. But the fact that we have Doug Ford as premier right now is because the Liberals, even if they knew they were going to lose and lose hard, decided to not tell people to vote for the NDP because they would rather have a Conservative premier than a NDP one. And how the Conservatives and the Liberals are virtually identical when it comes to their policies. You are from Ontario, okay. So am I. Thanks for the things. I don't understand why so many progressives vote Democrats. I'm surprised there hasn't been a push for third-party progressives. It's because in America, like, the thing is, really with the way that the U.S. system works, it's virtually impossible for a third party to get any real traction. Like, third-party candidates so rarely... Like, think about it this way. The U.S. is over 200 and is like, no, it will be 250 in 2026. So it's almost 250 years old. They have had precisely one political party that was a third party actually come to become a main party. And it only happened because another political party fell apart. Like, obviously, something about the way that America functions is basically says that these are the only two political parties, and there's really no way to change them. And ever since that time that change did happen, which was in the 1860s, it not only did it have a lot of people from the party before, like everyone will say that, like, oh yeah, the Republican Party came in and the Whig Party died, but like a lot of the Republican Party was made up of people from the Whig Party. Like, they just changed parties. Like, a lot of, like, the kind of Whig senior members just ended up becoming Republicans. But also on top of that, like, yeah, it's just very... third-party candidates have a, like... There is no viable path to getting a third party into federal politics in America. It's just not possible at this point. No one's come even close. And that means that really, if you want to get politics done in America, like the United States is you have to work within one of the two parties. And unfortunately, both those parties are extremely right-wing parties. Democratic Party doesn't actively heighten attacks on minorities. Is that a meaningful difference? That is a meaningful difference. Yeah, that's so, like, yeah, a lot of times progressives vote Democrat because they're doing damage control against, like, you know, the active march towards fascism that's happening in the Republican Party. But for getting any progressive legislation done, you basically can't do it through electoralism. You have to do it through activism. Are you talking about Abe Lincoln as a third party, or yes? On the other hand, no third party has been willing to build a base nationwide. I mean, the Socialist Party, the People's Party, those all tried, but just anytime like a political current gets big enough to become a viable third party, one of the two other parties will change its position to sort of absorb that movement into its coalition. Like the reason why the American, a lot of times, like a lot of the American progressive movement in the early 20th century, which was kind of making its own party, then the Democrats decided to just invite them into them, and they just got amalgamated by the Democratic Party. What do I think the Democratic establishment would have done if Biden died right after all the neoliberals pulled out? I don't know. Part of me thinks that they would push for Bernie to be president, and then they would push for Bernie to be president, and then they would drop. They would try to, then they would become obstinate and start blocking things as soon as Bernie came to power, or they would probably push for some sort of they'd probably push to do something really anti-democratic at the DNC to try and force the Democrats out of, or to try to force Bernie out of a position, or someone might kill Bernie. Those are like the things I think would have happened if Bernie ended up becoming the nominee out of surprise. Debs in the Socialist Party was a closest second, yeah. Socialist Party did very well before it kind of got amalgamated into the Democratic Party, too. What are your thoughts on the Democrats having open primaries while Republicans have closed primaries, and the history of why? The Democratic Party has had a very, pro-democracy activist base, while the Republicans have an anti-democracy activist base. So it makes total sense to me that that one would have open primaries, one would have closed primaries. And even then, the Democrats don't have all open primaries. Like, look, Joe Biden won because he was able to clinch the least Democratic primaries in the country. Like, the South Carolina primary is one of the most anti-democracy primaries in the entire country. It is the one that is the hardest to vote in. And that's when, only the olds get to vote through, and that's why, that's why Biden got through. And Biden was also able to lie to people and convince them that somehow voting for that that Bernie Sanders was a risky candidate, despite the fact that he was the most popular politician in America. But whatever. Doesn't having open primaries allow conservative Republicans to make up a substantial voting base in the Democrats? That sort of there's people who think that that's the case, but it's not very often the case. What open primaries tends to do for the Democrats is it allows more non-Republicans, it allows more independents to vote. And it allows more people who are not registered Democrats to have a say. And a lot of times that means that insurgent candidates like Bernie Sanders get a lot more support. A lot more college students come out to support. So the voter turnout when you have open primaries tends to skew a lot more left. But then when you have closed primaries where you have to be a registered Democrat and you have to have a registration X amount of months before, that means that any presidential primary candidate has to do a lot more on the ground work in order to make sure that their voter base comes out. And if your voter base is not typically people who are invested in the Democratic Party, it's a much more hard thing to do. And so that's why closed primaries tend to very, very much skew towards the more right-wing candidates, to the point where the most right-wing Democratic candidate was the one who won in the least Democratic primary. Look at for example, the most Democratic primary, or actually, not a primary, it was a caucus, but the caucus that had the most amount of work to try and open it up to everybody who wanted to participate was Nevada, and fucking Bernie mopped the floor with it. And you can see a direct line between the more that they suppress the vote, the more the candidate the Democratic Party wants to win wins. U.S. military, Katrina, radiation. Do you know how the U.S. Okay. The other day I had this idea for a sci-fi story where a gamma burst, or whatever, hits North America and the radiation kills all the adults. Okay. Not the kids. The kids are just alive somehow, okay? You know how the U.S. military handled the Katrina aftermath. How do you think they'd handle a worse disaster almost the entire country? I feel like the United States would probably not be able to have continuity, really, in such a situation. If literally every adult human in the United States died, there would just basically not be a United States anymore. All right, let's see what we got for. Let's see if we can do another question. I only got 3 more questions for the on in my collection for tonight, and we got about half an hour, so I feel like I could get to them and still answer a lot of stuff from the chat. Do you think eco-fascism is inevitable? I seriously hope not. I definitely think that eco-fascism is the political current that that the left is going to be fighting in the latter half of the 21st century. It's already started with 2015, 2016, and the Trump administration, but like, although not the Trump administration itself, but there was a lot more eco-fascists amongst like the far right supporters of Trump. And I do think that eco-fascism is going to become more of an ideology as we are further and further no longer able to ignore climate change, which we're sort of getting to the point of right now. Like, we're already hearing rumblings that more and more people, even in the conservative part of the political spectrum, are starting to believe in climate change. And their next step will probably be eco-fascism. So that is definitely a thing that we're going to have to be fighting against in the future. But there'd still be Hawaii and the U.S. as overseas empire. I don't think that you'd be able to use like Guam and like some military bases to establish a reestablish a U.S. state. I feel like losing that many people, there's nothing left. Is anti-CRT just the modern Frankfurt School conspiracy theory? I mean, it's the new cancel culture / political correctness / Frankfurt School. Like, the thing about the American right is just occasionally they learn a new word, and the word just becomes a word for bad thing that I don't like, and then because Republicans are fucking idiots, they're like, they're legislation, they're the people who they vote for, their politicians can just pass these laws that are like, we're going to ban that bad word you don't like, and that'll make people, and it'll make these like people fucking just like cheer for joy. I don't exactly know what, like, for example, Florida banning critical race theory in their schools is going to mean, really. They haven't really. I haven't really seen anything that talks about what like that's going to tangibly mean, because I would say that pretty much every Republican who was involved with banning critical race theory in schools in Florida has no idea what critical race theory means, and it sort of feels like when like random rural towns in Tennessee were banning Sharia law, like it's just virtue signaling their racism. To get their supporters ginned up, but I'd be interested in seeing what they actually mean in actual legislation. But Republicans are very good at making up a thing, getting their base very mad about it, and then passing laws to ban this thing that they're mad at that they just don't like. And the law has absolutely no like substance to it. It's just a thing that they did to get people mad. That's my take. What happened to runaway slaves that fled to Canada? Did they mostly go back to the U.S. once slavery was abolished? No. See, a lot of like what's it called? Canada has like a lot. There's a lot of Canadian black people trace their origins to being escaped slaves from the United States, and like we have a lot of like Canada's black population. It's not as big as America's, but there is a percentage of that population that can trace their lineage to those people. It's usually either that or they're immigrants from like Afro-Caribbean region. So the predominant two groups in this country. But yeah, like there's I want to say in Kingston there's like a famous all black battalion. There's a there was black communities all across America. Most famous in like Halifax, they had the kind of town of Africville that was was a segregated black community, yeah. We also had a fair chunk of immigration of African Americans that came from the American Revolution, because a lot of British generals, when they were fighting in the South, would go to plantations and basically offer people their freedom if they fought for the British. So when the British withdrew from the war, a lot of them were like a lot of them, and also a lot of refugees from just the 13 colonies who did not want to be part of the United States. All of those refugees went to Canada, and they were given like parcels of land and stuff like that. Obviously, the black community did not receive the same amount of treatment on that, but yeah, it's still a mass movement of people. It's a lot of the reasons, not specifically on slaves, but like the sort of mass refugee crisis created by the American Revolution of people coming to Canada, of loyalists who basically left the country, right? That's why in a lot of Canadian history classes, the American Revolution is sort of considered a beginning point for both Canada and America. Because before the American Revolution, Canada was a very sparsely populated colony, and was predominantly French and Catholic. What happened was after the American Revolution, when the Loyalists moved to Canada and settled, sort of that resulted in a big population increase of English-speaking Canadians. All right. What historical would I regard as the most interesting? The most interesting. I'm so bad with superlatives, Like I'm very bad at like having a favorite thing, or like what's the most important thing, or like that kind of stuff. But let me think for a little bit. I always think, if you were to think of like an event, because like when I'm thinking of a period, I would say the Axial Age was probably the most interesting period. The Axial Age was sort of this period thousands of years ago where like every major religion can trace its origins, and like there's a statement that this like the Axial Age was the period where there's basically been no new ideas invented ever since. That's not true, but it's not as not true as you think it should be, So I find that interesting. But, yeah. If the U.S. had opted to just not defend the anti-LGBT law, one of any number of hate groups could have gone to court and said, the government isn't willing to defend this law in court. We're going to. So it's probably better to have DOJ lawyers defending the law instead on a constrained way rather than have hate group lawyers go out to defend it. I don't even know what this is a reference to. That anti-LGBTQ law. You have to be more specific. There's tons of them now. But no, but yeah, that's a really weird way to go out of your way to try and defend the U.S. government defending an anti-LGBTQ law. What do you think about psychedelics and entheogens? If you feel open to share, do you have any experiences in Minecraft with brewing potions of boundary dissolution? I have never, in Minecraft, ever brewed potions of boundary dissolution. Not that I haven't been curious about trying out Minecraft alchemy, but it's never a thing that I've gotten around to. Honestly, I haven't done that much research on this stuff, so I can't really say much to it. What I can say about the idea of psychedelics and stuff like that is that I know people who are neuroscientists who are very interested in some of the stuff that is coming out of those situations. Like, one of my friends is a neuroscientist who had a very interesting interest in like psilocybin or I don't remember, whatever. Psilocybin, that's it, psilocybin, and like its effect for helping people with depression and like like PTSD and stuff. Very interesting. Will climate change benefit Russia? I mean, yeah, in the same way that Canada would be benefited. Like, there's huge amounts of territory that's very, unusable because it's so cold, and it opening up would definitely push things. And also, the Northwest Passage opening up in the Arctic is definitely going to help both countries. SUV drivers killing and injuring protesters. Why so little coverage? I don't know why there's so little coverage, but yeah, drivers have been killing pedestrians like a lot more recently. It's actually like an epidemic of people running over people with their cars. And like, I go on my like local city subreddit occasionally, and it's people who just are like, just absolutely frothing at the mouth at their love of the idea of killing people with their cars because the people are on bikes or something. Like, it's like to an absolutely disgusting degree. And yeah, and also like there are states in America that are passing laws that are basically making it legal to kill people with your car if those people are protesting, which is super fucked up. Can't really chat. We're gonna listen in. Well, nice singing, Nine Tails. We've got about 25 minutes left, but my voice is also starting to go very fast. So. Oh, somebody submitted a question that's just ASCII picture of some penises. Thank you very much. The DOJ opted to defend a law that allows religious schools to discriminate. If they had not bothered, hate groups would have got to court. I mean, that's an assumption. Oh, man. Oh, man, it's been a good day. Permafrost melting is going to make a lot of that land in Russia and Canada unusable for capitalist exploits. Yeah, a lot of the benefit is going to come from not the permafrost area, but sort of the boreal forest that's sort of south of that. And also the opening up of seaways. They tried and were denied because the DOJ is handling it. Well, kudos. I'm glad that they all feel good that they came to support a law that dehumanizes an entire class of people, because if they wouldn't do it, then somebody else would do it. That's always a justification that I think is good and has worked throughout history. So the thing is that the Democrats always seem to act like this. They always act like they're hamstrung by norms and rules, when like a lot of these things are not, like, they're not set in stone. They're not like, they're not hard, fast rules. If the Donald Trump administration's taught them anything, it's that all of this is just being held up by just like rules of decorum. And if you really think that rules of decorum are more important than doing the necessary things that need to get done to make the world a better place and to stop abject suffering, then you don't actually care about these people. Also, weren't frozen super viral infections a thing with melting permafrost? It's a thing people are concerned about. I don't know if we've had a case of it yet, but it is is there smallpox buried in the ice? I don't know, but it could be. We were able to find some of the last strains of the Spanish flu because they were in the bodies of people who died in the Arctic. So that is like a thing that could happen. What do I think of the Paris Climate Agreement and the overall European Union's attempt to reduce carbon emissions? It's too little. Too little, too late. They need to be doing a whole lot more. And a lot sooner. And even the Paris Climate Agreement, they can't even get people to actually live up to that. What do I think about pushing acceleration theory in far-right circles to push socialist politicians in the... that won't work. That assumes that people on the right can think more than 2 steps ahead, which is not a thing that they're wont to do. Keep in mind, when you're dealing with right-wing people, they are simple creatures that are motivated only by hate and a desire for revenge and to hurt. You're not going to be able to get them to think about acceleration when their only desire is to elect big man to hurt the people I don't like. You can only really get people on the left to trip over themselves by doing something as dumb as accelerationism. Yeah, Ray Yanma, you described it right. The climate agreement is a joke. It's like using a Band-Aid on a cut artery. Precisely. Ah, boy. The bigger problem with organisms awakening in the permafrost is that they're producing carbon and methane by digesting at massive exponential rate, which is accelerating global warming in a really bad way. Yeah, the methane problem in the ice in the Arctic is a huge fucking problem. It's one of those things that if we don't manage climate change very soon, is going to lead to a runaway effect that'll make things a lot worse. What I think of right-wingers is that they're a self-fulfilling feedback loop of individualist entitlement. I mean, you're giving them a lot of credit. My read on the right-wing people I've known over the years is that they say all this idea about individualism and even entitlement or whatever, but at the end it's hate. It's the only thing that gets them going. Whether it's hating the intangible, undefinable notion of what lazy people are, or whatever bigotries that they've been handed down that they've clinged to as a way to elevate their own sense of personal self-worth at the expense of others. But at the end, at the core of all of it, the thing that motivates, the fact that no conservative seems to give a shit about the budget when they're in power, but only when they're not in power. They don't care about it. They care about hate. Hate is the only thing that motivates the right. Like I like you want to have a more nuanced, smart take on it. I get that, but like I don't know. The more I look into it, the more it's like it's the only thing that keeps them going. It's their only juice. Like at the end of the day, they don't want to see the world a better place because they don't think a better world is possible. So all they want to do is make sure that the people they don't like suffer. There was a study that came out a little while ago that showed that that Republicans, specifically in America, were more motivated. Were not motivated by policies. They were not motivated by things they wanted to happen, but they were motivated by a desire to see the people they don't like suffer. That's why they're so into doing things like triggering the libs and all that kind of stuff. That is a stronger motivating factor to see the people they don't like suffer than the actual any policies they actually want to push. No problem, Ninetails. Don't. I was just riffing. They might call some people they may call people lazy, but a lot of them have chronic illnesses. Yeah, like the thing is, I don't actually think there is such thing as a lazy person. I feel like lazy people, like the idea of a lazy person is a thing that was invented by Protestants to try and define people's worth through the amount of work they can do. It's just capitalist logic applied to human beings. Laziness isn't a thing. Not like people are not motivated to do nothing. The idea that there's like people who would just do nothing and play Xbox all day if they didn't have to worry about money is a farce. It's not real. There aren't people who would do that for their lives. A lot of people think that they are lazy because they basically hate working because working sucks. But if they legit did not have to work to make money, they would find things to do. They would be productive in ways that would actually be fulfilling to them. There aren't so much people who are lazy as there are people who are alienated, if that makes sense. The poor or working class Republicans exist, but it's widely overstated. Yeah, that is a thing that people, like, a lot of poor people are not, like, poor people aren't Republicans. They're, in America specifically, like, poor people in America tend to be more racially diverse and part of discriminated against groups. Poor people either tend to skew Democratic or they tend to skew not political. Like, non-voters are way bigger in the working class than they are amongst... Where Republicans really shine is in white, suburban, middle-class, fucking small business tyrants. That's the Republican base. That's where they're really strong. They also have strong power in extremely rural parts of America, but that is still overstated because most people who live in those regions are not Republicans. They are not political. They don't vote. I'm sure my dad would think I'm lazy if I wasn't his son. Jeez. A lot of Appalachia is quite anarchist in its tendency, and young redneckish folks tend to really embrace social ecology. Might just be sampling bias, though. Like, the thing is, like, everyone will say, like, oh yeah, this white working class, very Republican, we got to appeal to them. And then you, like, look at, like, who are the actual, like, right wing of the Republican Party, and they're by and large richer than the average population. They make above the average amount of money in the country. They're suburbanites. They're part of the professional class. They're not necessarily educated, but they are higher earners than average. When you're talking about people who are actually fucking poor, like actual working class people, the people who work in service, people who work at Starbucks, the people who make minimum wage, like they are way disproportionately black and brown, disproportionately LGBTQ plus, disproportionately people who have disabilities, and yet for some reason there's still this like idea that like the poor people in America who are the Republican base are like these like white poor like coal miners, and it's like this is a class that barely exists anymore. So yeah, come on. What's wrong with social ecology? I did not know there. I didn't think there was anything wrong with social ecology. The main thing is that for the working class, if you're part of the working class in America, the Democratic Party is really your only option, because a lot of people who are poor in America are poor because they are also part of a like discriminated against group, and the only party that's looking out for people who are part of a marginalized group are the Democrats. And because the American class structure is so based on these like racial, like especially racial hierarchies, in America, a lot of times racism and the discussion about race has sort of supplanted discussions about class. Just because America's had such a close relationship between, not saying that it's like a one-to-one comparison, but race and class are so interlinked in America that talking about one is almost talking about the other. And also, it's useful because the white working class can also just be like can just have racism played upon them in order to get them to go against their class interests. But in many ways, I have a plan to make a video about Marx and immersions and stuff like that. But like, you can try and convince people of things, but at the end of the day, people will more or less follow their economic class interests when it comes to the decisions they make. And that plays out in the demographics of the political parties in America, including the people who don't vote, because the people who don't vote tend to come from the classes that have no party doing anything for them. Yeah, the fact that like the January 6th rioters are put in a certain light. Like the January 6th rioters had to be people who could afford to take time off work and go all the way to the United States, all the way to the Washington D.C. to participate in that riot. Like it wasn't like Joel, Joe the bag man at Walmart. It was like the owners of small boat dealerships and like suburban kids. Those who tend not to vote are also the people who have more difficulty voting logistically. They're kept out of the way from the polls. Yeah, that's true too. Some of them even took private jets to DC that day, yeah. We never hear about black rural voters because it's nearly impossible for many of them to get to a place to vote, yeah? I see the wind on you and you're jealous. Yeah, well, this isn't wind. This is a fan. I got a fan right here. But yeah, it is nice. Yeah, I almost... maybe I should write this down because I think I really want to make a video about rural poverty in America. It's a thing that we do not talk about, and it's a huge fucking problem in the United States. And it's like one of the major sources of American decay right now. Is like, because like we talk about, we talk about things like what's it called? Like, we talk about issues like the opioid crisis, for example. And again, that's a surface problem when like, and also gun violence, honestly. Those two issues are, we talk about them surface. Like the issue with gun violence is that there are guns that exist and therefore they need to be controlled in somehow. And that like you know, the opioid crisis, we need to have we need to address the people who are suffering from addictions and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, okay, I'm on board for both of those, but they're not looking at the systemic root that causes these situations happen. Like the majority of gun deaths are suicides, and people like in the United States, like one of the like major things that people really don't talk about but really should is how rural suicides are like a fucking epidemic right now. Like rural people, like people in rural areas committing suicide is a massive number. At the same time, the opioid epidemic is what are called like deaths. Like this all fits under what are called deaths by despair. Like suicide, drug overdose, these are the deaths that happen in communities where people have lost hope, that there's nothing to grab onto, and you've got rural poverty going so bad that like people are moving away to the point where there are parts of the United States that are now so barrenly populated that they wouldn't even be able to qualify for statehood if they applied today. And at the same time, like, crimes like cattle wrangling have come back. Like, it's actually bananas how much rural poverty and how much the interior of the United States has just rotted away because nobody looks out for these people. And it has caused some very serious, deep problems, and no one talks about it. How do I know I'm not just lazy? My mental problems feel like excuses a lot of the time. That's society imposing that feeling on you. Trust me, as an ADHD person, I know that feeling, that you're not just struggling to get things done, you're just lazy. Well, like, that's just our fucking Protestant society trying to force you to feel bad for, you know, the quirkiness of who you are, basically. Can I do a video on right to repair and open source hardware, especially in the context of agricultural equipment? I mean, I feel like there are other people who could do a video on that better than I could. Cities are racial industrial units linked together, and rural towns the same units but separated by some distance and population count. Rural areas are often only an hour away from cities. Okay. Healthcare could deeply impact drug addiction, homelessness, violence, and a host of other issues. Yes. Whew. It does tie into debt, etc., I guess. Yeah, it's just that, like, there are some issues that I don't, like, I could do that video. It would take me months of, like, research and something to to really be able to say anything. And at the same time, in that time, what I would say would not be super like impactful or meaningful because it's not a thing that I've really had to deal with. While somebody who actually can speak to such an issue probably should. Are you ignoring my settlements question? Yeah, I am. I don't really have a good answer, and we also have like a minute and a half before the stream ends. Is there anything currently being overlooked by mainstream media that you want to bring to light right now? Kind of. There's one thing that I think I really want to see somebody pick apart, and I don't really know what the answer is, and that is, has anyone followed the news about how people are going fucking feral as we reopen Like the fact that like airlines have had to stop serving alcohol because like fights are breaking out on airplanes, and that like mass shootings have gone like way up, and like that like it just seems like as we're starting to see each other again, it seems like we have like just by like having a year of just being like not socialized, we've become extremely irritable and really like angry with each other. And because of like anti-maskers and anti-vaxxers and stuff like that, like we're all paranoid of each other because people have gone down all these these like random rabbit holes. And it's like, man, like reopening is going to be like a really messed up time. And people don't like, I did not expect things for people to be in this bad a shape. And that's a thing that I don't really know where to even start on such a question. Like, where do you even start doing that kind of research? Where do you even like, who's like, where do you write about it? I don't know. I don't have an answer, but that's something that I feel like, is a really big deal right now. But because we don't really have the language to talk about it, we haven't really seen much stuff on it. Do I plan on talking about Canadian topics? If one comes up, like, I'll tell you this. I'll be a lot more flexible with my subjects when I get 100,000 subscribers. At the moment, my what's it called? My audience is over 56% American, which means that if I do Canadian stuff, I have to like kind of do it from a perspective of like, what does an American want to know about what's going on in Canada? But like, this is obviously a big deal. The attack in London, like I live in London. Like that, I have spent time in the mall where the guy who murdered that family was arrested. Like I know the neighborhood where that happened. It happened in my city. So that impacted me pretty heavily. And the residential school mass graves also very like affecting. But at the moment, like I really want to get this push to 100,000 subscribers, and so I'm going to keep making what I'm doing until I can get to 100K, and then I'm probably going to be a little bit more lax in like hyper optimizing my content for maximum viewership, if that makes sense. Thanks for it's my non-money. Thank you, Ron, for the $5 super chat. All right, we are now, it's 9:02, so I think it's time for me to wrap it up for the night. So let's see, who are we going to raid? We raided Dimitri last week. Should we raid No Comment Chick? We haven't raided No Comment Chick. Let's just make sure that No Comment Chick is actually streaming right now. Because I'm learning that I end up raiding people right before they stop. But they're giving me a commercial, so I can't tell right now. All right, let's do this. Okay. She is there, so let's raid. No Comment Chick. All right, everybody. I'll be back on Monday. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Cheers. Be good. Bye.